Hi there. Back in May 9, 2020, I was asked to give a presentation at the Women Techmakers Manila 2020 online web conference. We ran into some technical difficulties on the audio. Maybe it was because I was using Firefox, since for some odd reason I can't share my screen through StreamYard when I use Chrome. Maybe it was due to my internet connection. I'll never know. Fortunately, I had already planned to record my talk in case these technical snafus happened. I forgot to turn on the recording during the start of my presentation, so a lot of the self-introduction wasn't recorded. But for the most part, the recording itself was flawless. So, here's my presentation for those who weren't able to hear me clearly that day. Enjoy! Back in, sorry, I started programming as a Java Enterprise developer back in 2000, but before that, I was also a trainer. Okay, and I did IT training, and I got into the tech industry. I got into tech, but I did not finish a tech course. I'm actually a mathematics major from UST. Uh, but I've but even before I got into college, I was already programming a lot, and I would usually be interested in languages that were just up and coming. So it has been a long time. It had been a long time since I last had a language that piqued my interest. Uh, First, of course, there was Java because it was required, it was much needed. Then there was Android in 2009. And then around 2012, that was the time when I got into Go. So let me just take a look first, or let me just share my screen now. All right. So this is Java Enterprise. Oh, sorry, this is Go, rather. So we're now looking at Go as the next enterprise language. But what exactly is Go? Okay, so we're going to be talking up first about a little bit about Go, what I'll be using later on to demo on how Go is used in an enterprise session, and then there's going to be a little bit of Q&A. But before we begin, uh, let's try looking first at some things. If you have a Gmail account, my material, or rather this particular slide only, is in classroom.google.com. And if to go into that class, if you're not yet part of it, then just use that particular code, CSIQXGN. If you're still not able to get in, later on I'll be showing you where my Bitbucket, or sorry, rather my GitHub account is. So you could just look up my account and find out the links to where I got all my material from. All right. As also earlier mentioned, I'm part of Go Manila. Okay. Go Manila is Manila's monthly meetup group focused on examining applications, frameworks, technologies written in the Go programming language. So we usually meet on Monday nights. So that's the reason why we call it Go Manila Mondays. And we do this once a month usually. But due to the pandemic, we're now looking at trying to set up online meetups streamed live through YouTube as well. The only problem that we have is that uh, there are relatively few people actually using Go in the Philippines, that there aren't that many speakers who could present over at our meetups. So because of this, we're already looking into how we're going to do online workshops on Go. If you are interested, do let me know later. So as I said, if you're interested in accessing Go, okay, or if you're interested in learning Go, you could go join our group here, okay? Or there's also the Go study group for women from Women Who Code Manila. Just join the meetup group there, and watch out for the schedules that will have that will anyway, as I said, so I left off at Women Who Code Manila, which is one of the largest and most active community of engineers dedicated to inspiring women to excel in technology, uh, or rather in technology careers. So we offer, or they offer, free hands-on technical events and study groups, and panel discussions, lightning talks, and keynotes for influential tech industry experts and innovators and investors. So if you want to join, I have our Go study group there. So if you want to join me there, this is going to be online as well. We already started the first one last month. Just join us over at Women Who Code Manila. There's the meetup link, and so yeah, that's it. Right, so let's go straight now into the background of Go. So what is Go? Go is a modern general purpose language. It's open source and it is supported by Google. Okay? It was created back in around September 2007 when Robert Geismer, Rob Pike, and Ken Thompson started sketching the goals for the new language. And around November 2009, they decided, okay, let's make the language public, open source to the public. Right? Now, the language is called Go, not Golang. Okay? The reason why it's called Golang is because of the website, golang.org. They could not get go.org because someone was already using it. So it became golang.org. And people started also using the term Golang so that it's easier to search over the internet, or it's easier to search for topics related to the Go language. But we always usually just mention it as Go, capital G-O. So Go compiles to native machine code, okay? And it has a very lightweight syntax. This makes it really easy to understand the language. In fact, most of the time, from experience and from the experiences of a lot of other people, matagal na yung matuto yung fundamentals of Go for more than 2 days. So you could actually learn this over the weekend and start using it in work by Monday. So you start studying Saturday, you get all the fundamentals down on a whole Saturday, you get the advanced topics on a Sunday, and by Monday you can actually start churning code using the language itself. So it is really that easy. And as Rob Pike says, Go's purpose is to make its designers' programming lives better. Okay? So there's 3 things about Go. One is its efficient compilation, efficient execution, and ease of programming, all of which were not available in the same in just one mainstream language at that time. I mean, you have Python and JavaScript, which makes it easy to program, but the thing with Python and JavaScript is that it doesn't really have that level of safety and efficiency similar to C++ and Java, which is also the reason why a lot of enterprise developers, a lot of companies would rather go to Java simply because of the safety and efficiency. But when it comes to ease of programming, Java is not that easy to learn. Okay? It's supposed to be simpler than C++, yeah, but right now, given all the other new languages like Rust, Elixir, Swift, Go, Java has now become quite cumbersome. Okay? So Go was among the first of several new languages that have made programming development an active and almost mainstream field again because it is that simple. Okay? So that's the thing. One of the tenets of Go design is that of its simplicity. Each language feature should be easy to understand. Okay? Uh, what they did with Go is they reduced the clutter and complexity. For loops, used to be you would know a for loop, a while loop, a do while loop. The while and the do while, they're both gone from Go. The only thing that's left there is for. Pretty much you can do anything with the for loop. So it's become that simple. Everything is declared exactly once. The syntax is clean and light on keywords, meaning, well, the Go compiler forces you to keep your code clean. If you, for example, if you declared a variable and you never used it, the compiler will tell you that something's wrong with the code. Remove the variable that you are not using at all. So it doesn't like stuttering, like, foo foo, my foo dot foo, my foo equals new foo foo. It's just it's become very simple to do that right now. Okay? And then again, there is no type hierarchy. The other tenet of Go design is its orthogonality. Go's features should interact in predictable and consistent ways. Methods can be implemented for any type. The structures the structures that you create actually represent data, while the interfaces do represent an abstraction. Go in itself is procedural, but you can also apply some elements of OOP. Okay? The language was designed for today's needs. It has been, when I started using this in 2012, when I started learning this in 2012, by 2013, a new type of containerization called Docker was released. And Docker is actually created using Go. Okay? And Go has been used in cloud and network services. It's been used to create command line interfaces or even scripting for command line. It's been used in web development. Later on, part of that web development is microservices, which I'll be demoing later. It's been heavily used with DevOps and site reliability. Okay. It's been heavily used for DevOps and site reliability. It has been used for machine learning because when you say machine learning, usually what you would think of is C++ or Python. People would usually go for Python on machine learning because it's much easier to manipulate than C++, obviously. But with Go, you get that simplicity, but you also get the speed that a C++ compiled, that something like a compiled language like C++ would have. So it's actually becoming much better to use Go than Python. But again, not many people still know how to use Go. And then, of course, there's enterprise systems. A lot of companies outside the Philippines are using Go for their enterprise stuff. There are a few companies in the Philippines, a few here in Metro Manila. There's some also in Cebu. There's a few in Davao. There's even one or two over in Batangas, if I remember correctly, or Cavite. And they're able to create enterprise systems using Go, even more so as a replacement for Java. Okay. If you want to know more about Go, you have two websites here, golang.org and go.dev. Okay. Golang.org is the home of the open source Go project and the Go distribution, while go.dev is a companion site to answer the three questions. So who else is using Go, what do they use it for, and how do you find other useful Go packages? In Go, the creators of Go do not like you creating frameworks. Instead, they would rather that you create packages, okay? So that other people can easily use it, well, a package, a library. Okay? So other people can easily use the library instead as part of their system, rather than trying to learn a framework. Having a framework negates the simplicity of the Go language. Who are using it right now? So the companies that use Go right now, you have PayPal, you have American Express, you have Salesforce. Netflix is using it. Uber is using it. Even Twitter is already using it. And of course, you have Twitch, Dropbox, and so forth. If you want to learn about Go, if you want to learn programming with Go, you have all these links: Tour of Go, Code Academy, Exercism.io, Google, sorry, wrong spelling, Google Developers Code Labs, and Go for Sizes. So all of these, you could go to the link later on, and yeah, you can visit these links. First and foremost, Tour of Go is awesome. I used Tour of Go from the start. When I started learning back in 2012, and to dive into Golang using Tour of Go, you don't even need to install Go on your machine, because the way to, or rather, an emulator is already part of the website itself. Okay, so let's dive into what we're going to be using for the demo right now. What we'll be doing is, what we'll be creating is a microservice. Okay, just for you to see how easy it is, or how fast it is to create a microservice using Go. The language, or rather the library or the package that I'll be using is called the Go Kit. So as I said, Go is a great general purpose language. You can use it for anything, anywhere, even for IoT if you want to. The Go Kit was created by someone else. It's not part of Google. It's not part and parcel of Google. This is another open source project that uses Go, or someone used Go and created a collection of packages that are used to create microservices. Okay. For most of you, you might be used to the MVC layer, Model View Controller. But under microservices, there's a different architecture. You're not dealing with MVC anymore. Instead, with microservices, you're dealing with three layers called the transport, the endport, and the service layer. All right? So the transport domain is bound to concrete transports like HTTP, or if you're familiar with Google Remote Procedural Calls, or gRPC. gRPC is another type of transport as well. So essentially, when you say transport, it's like, it's the URL itself. What are you using to expose what we call as the endpoint? So your endpoint is it's an action, or it's a handler. It is like an action or handler on a controller. If you implement two transports, HTTP and gRPC, for example, you might have two methods of sending requests to the same endpoint. Okay? And then you have the service layer. If you remember MVC, Model View Controller, your service will be your model, so to speak. Um, Services are where all the business logic is implemented, right? So your service is usually glued together using multiple endpoints, as you will see later on. So let's have a demo. So my demo here, just to make it faster, is, it's all pre-recorded so that I don't have to type anymore. Okay. But this is the same demo that can be seen at the gokit.io website. All right. The difference is that I've made the demo I've done the demo in such a way that it would be much easier to follow or much easier to understand than the website itself. It took me a while to understand what the creator of the site was trying to do. A while being 30 minutes, because again, Go is really that easy to understand. But it is actually quite easy to, the demo itself is really quite easy to follow. So let's take a look at the first one. So our first one is testing the workspace. Okay. So here, if you notice, what I did here is I created, this is the very first thing I did. I'm using Visual Studio Code as my IDE, but you don't really need an IDE to create programs using Go. You can use any IDE or any text editor of your choice. Notepad if you want to, Notepad++ or whatever. Okay, Sublime Text. But yeah, first of all, what I did here is here is a Go mod, init, Bitbucket, and so forth. Normally, what happens with Go is when you want to retrieve libraries, when you want to retrieve packages from somewhere else other than what is available with the Go language libraries, then you just have to mention where this particular library is located. This is very similar to git clone. So Go mod is actually sitting on top of Git. If you don't have Git on your machines, Go mod will not work. Okay? So you need to make sure that Git is is installed on your machine before you try to use Go mod. So inside Go, once you've issued the Go mod statement, the Go mod command for that matter, it will create a go.mod file, and it will say, okay, the name of this module or the name of this package, this library for that matter, the name of this library is based on bitbucket.org, CN Presentations, GDG, Women Techmakers -2020. Yeah, take note of that link, because that is also exactly where I will be uploading some of the files that I am using with this presentation as well. In case you cannot get into the Google Classroom, that is the link that you would want to go to instead. So now I'm creating here the main.go file or code. And I'm just going to test out if this is all working. So I have here main, okay, and then I said that, okay, I'm going to print out hello world. Notice that when I try to build the code, it tells me that, FMT is undefined. So I've forgotten to import the package. So building it should be okay. And once you build it, it will generate an executable file. Okay. I'm using Linux here, so that's it. So I have to use uh, dot slash to be able to run the code. Okay, sorry about that. So dot slash to run the code. If you are using this on Windows, or if you compile this on Windows, then it will build an executable file, a .exe file for that matter. If you're creating a language from, if you're creating the language from what do you call this? From Linux, or you're creating the code from Linux, but it's supposed to go into Windows, or it's supposed, or the resulting binary is supposed to be installed on Windows, then what will happen? But then there is a way for you to build the code in Linux so that it knows what is the target operating system. So you do not, unlike the old unlike the old C, or some C programs, wherein you need the actual operating system in order to build your your executable for a different target. You can do all of that using just one machine. So that's it for the testing of Hello World. So now, let's start with setting up the service layer. All right. With setting up the service layer, I'm going to create here, or I created here, service.go. Again, I created the package here. It's the main package. I'm now importing some libraries which I'll be using, or some packages which I'll be using. And I've started out by creating a service. Okay. Now, the string service, any service that you create here using the Go kit is created as an interface. And as with interfaces, you specify what methods should be part of that interface. And then here, I'm creating a new type of structure called string service. I didn't put anything inside it because I just want it, I want this structure to be pretty much malleable, pretty much flexible. So here, what I'm doing here right now is I've started creating the business logic, or the implementation for the uppercase method of the string service interface. And this is pretty much easy to understand. Okay? I made a mistake here. Okay? That's why there's a red line there. I made a mistake here. I'm going to correct this later on. That's supposed to be if S is a blank, or is an empty string. Okay? And as you can see, this is pretty much easy to understand at this point in time. It's supposed to return whatever string I gave to this function. It is supposed to return it as a in uppercase. So this tells me to what structure this is connected to. This tells me the method name, the parameters it accepts, and this is an output. So you could actually, for most people, or for most languages that you know of, functions or methods can only return one item. But in Go, you can return more than one. In this case, this is supposed to be returning two variables. So it returns a string or an error. So here it says that if the string is empty, then return empty string and then say ERR empty. We'll be creating this later on. And here it's just saying that, okay, if there's something, turn it into uppercase and then tell it that there's no errors generated. And then the next one here is I'm now creating the string service for count, which what this is just going to do is to simply count how many characters are there in the string. There's my err empty. Okay, so err empty errors.new. It's just going to say, oh, return an empty, return that you have an error. The error is an empty string. So I've compiled this. It's now given me the error that I forgot something over at the line that I told you about earlier. That's corrected. Okay. Notice there that you have here go FMT. Go FMT is your linter. Okay. So the nice thing about this right now is that you don't have that conversation that says, oh, dapat 3 tabs yan yung indentation, or 2 tabs yung intention, or 4 tabs yung indentation. No, that doesn't happen here anymore. You type go FMT, and all the go code is now reformatted so that it follows just one particular format. Okay, so you don't have that discussion anymore on how the code should look like, or how the code should be formatted. Okay. So now we have here setting up the endpoints. So in setting up the endpoints, you notice that I've created a file called transport.go. And the endpoints now, what I'm doing here is I'm essentially creating ways to call the services. So you can see here now that it's saying, okay, based on the context, whatever request I receive, okay, I am going to call service uppercase, which is actually the one here in service. I'm actually going to call the uppercase service. Okay. And if there is no error, I'll return the response. I'll return the result of the uppercase method or the uppercase function. Otherwise, it's going to return whatever error that uppercase function gave me. And so too with the endpoint for count. Now, all the endpoints that I'm creating here are for HTTP. If you're going to create new endpoints if you're going to be using some other transport like gRPC, then you're going to have to create another endpoint that would take care of gRPC. So you will have just one service, and then you can have as many transport methods as there are the types of transports that you have. So if you have both HTTP and gRPC, then you will have 2 endpoints for just one particular service. So here we have setting up the rest of the transports. So we've already created the endpoints, and now we're creating the transports. So first of all, there's the decode uppercase request and decode count request. So this is the transport. Okay, so up here is the endpoint, and then down here is your transport. In this case, it's saying that I am accepting requests or HTTP requests. Okay. So I have one for decode, one for decode uppercase, one for decode count, and another one for encoding the response. Now you'll notice here as well that I have here my structures, and each of these structures have something here called JSON colon S. The nice thing about this as well is, again, Go is a modern language. So one of the things that they're thinking of is make sure that it can easily, or someone can easily decode or parse JSON responses or JSON files. Okay? And parsing it is really just as easy as creating the structure for it. Okay? I have a JSON file that has two fields. One is called V and the other one is called ERR. And the value of ERR, or rather the default value of that is ERR omit empty. Okay, and then the default value of V is V, and so forth. Okay. So if you're wondering how this is created, usually what you would want to do is make sure that they are in order of how it's supposed to be read from the JSON file. So now we're creating the requests and responses, in which case we are simply going to go back to our main method. And we're going to edit now the main method so that it can start accepting requests and responses. Now here I'm declaring the service. Okay, let me just back up a bit. Okay. Or rather, yeah. So in stitching it all up, you have here your uppercase handler and so forth. Okay. Let me show you what the code here looks like right now. You have here your service, string service, you have your uppercase handler, which is supposed to call your make uppercase endpoint, which is here in your transport. Okay. And count handler is supposed to call make count endpoint, which is right over here. And then you have here http.handle uppercase, http handle count, and then log fatal if this will end, or rather the whole application is going to end if something goes wrong with this line. You have there http.listen and serve colon 8080 nil. This line, that's the only line you need in order to turn this whole application into a web server. Okay, that's it. Okay, running this whole application allows you to run your own web server already. You don't need to have you don't need to install this you don't need something like Apache web server and so forth. No, you don't need that anymore. You don't need an application server anymore or application web server. You just need to make sure that it knows what port this application is supposed to be serving from. Okay, let's stop there. Let's go back to my code, okay, so that you can see how this whole thing is run now. Okay. So when I built this, or I'm going to try to build this now, go build. Okay. So when I built this particular, the GoKit, okay, the GoKit library is immediately run, or is immediately downloaded, and it's also placed inside GoMod. So that way, this is how it keeps track of what stuff that I have, what the libraries it's using. And now, if I try to run this, ls, so I have here my GDG-Women Techmakers. Run it like that. The browser is actually already running at this point. So what I'm just going to do here is I'm going to look for my curl. This is a lot. So sorry. There we go. Okay. So curl uppercase. Okay. So it says, welcome to GDG-Women Techmakers. That's our JSON. Okay. It returns a JSON. And then if I say curl count, then it returns 36. If, for example, I returned or I gave a blank, something blank, okay, it's going to tell me, hey, it's an empty string. Okay. So it's now, I now have an API that is returning a JSON response. Okay. So there's actually 2 more videos here, but I'm going to stop here right now because we're going to be running out of time, unfortunately, because of the technical difficulty that we had. But essentially, this is how you create a very simple service. The rest of the video or the rest of the tutorial actually also shows how you're supposed to install or rather code other stuff like load balancing and so forth. Okay? All just using the Go library and the one who created the Go Kit library as well. Without you having to, if you want to get your feet wet but you don't want to install so many stuff for the meantime, you can actually use it all, you can actually do it all using Go. Besides, all the telemetry, the modern telemetry apps that you have right now, like all the load balancing apps right now, Docker, Kubernetes, Prometheus, all these actually were created using Go. Okay, so essentially you could not use Docker, or rather you could not use Kubernetes and Prometheus if you didn't want to use them, and you could actually create your own instrumentation, your own telemetry using just Go itself. It's actually like 25% harder, but if someone has already created a much better version, a much better library for it already, then might as well, hey, use it. Okay. And yeah, that's it. That's my demo. That's my very short demo. If you have any questions, sorry, that is not what I wanted to show. If you have any questions, you can ask here. Oh no, that's shells. That's not. I'm not Shell. I'm Charo. I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. Can I, from Gerald Mendeja, can I ask what IDEs does Go support? Can we use simple IDEs such as Sublime, Notepad? Yeah, I answered this earlier. Like I said, you could just simply use, you can just simply use Notepad. Like in Java, you can just simply use Notepad as well. But it is easier to use an IDE. It is much easier to use an IDE, especially with, as I said, what do you call this? Visual Studio Code, which I'm using, and there's also another one created. I forgot the other IDE out there, but yeah, you don't need to use an IDE. Okay? You don't need to use an IDE. You just really you just want an IDE more for the autocomplete actually. But any text editor that you have there, as long as you know how to use the command line, you can build it. You can build your code. In fact, if you noticed how I did it here, even though I am using an IDE, even though I am using VS Code, Visual Studio Code, I usually end up running the code, compiling the code using the terminal. Okay. I could open up a terminal here and and run it from there instead. Okay. Or compile it from there instead. So the compiling and the running is still done from a command line. It is not done, it is not, or rather, while the IDE can do this for me, it's still much easier for me to just, do a go build from the terminal itself, or for the command line itself. Okay. So, any other questions? No other questions? Pahabol, pahabol, pahabol. None. Okay. So that's it. That's my presentation. If you need to ask me more about Go and what Go can do, or if you need help learning the language, you can contact me from either my email or through Twitter. So I'm there on Twitter as HeadGeekette. You could also ask questions over at the classroom. If you do not have access to the classroom, then you could go to github.com or Bitbucket, to these two links, and I'll be uploading a repo just for links to all this stuff as well. All right. So I guess that's it. If there are no other questions, okay, that's it. Thank you.